So matriculants, we're gonna do another video lecture, and this one is gonna start with a series of videos focusing on human reproduction. I'll first do the male reproductive system, and then I will do everything that the male reproductive system encompasses, and then I will do the female reproductive system, which is a little more in depth, and I'll do the female reproductive system in various stages. We will first focus on the structures of the female reproductive system, your fallopian tube, your ovary, your endometrium, your uterine, your vagina, those types of things. And then from there on we will go into hormonal control, your FSH, your LSH, your progesterone, your estrogen, your endometrium thickening and disintegrating, all of those things that we will look at. But for now we're going to look at the male reproductive system in human part of human reproduction. And when I do female, I will also first make reference to this very important simple drawing that we need to understand, and this is the human life cycle. Now, based on what we have learned in meiosis and in DNA, we would now know that a sperm cell, a single sperm cell and a single ovum, and based on previous grades, will have 23 chromosomes. Right? Will have 23 chromosomes. So this haploid sperm cell here will have 23 chromosomes. And this haploid ovum will have 23 chromosomes. We know in life sciences, we make reference to the haploid as an N. Right? We make reference to the haploid as an N. And when fertilization takes place, and fertilization, simply put, is the fusel of male and female gametes to form a diploid zygote. That is simply put, right? So we will have the fertilization happening here. We will have that fusion happening between the haploid sperm and the haploid ovum to give us then what is the diploid zygote over here. And obviously this diploid zygote, in order to differentiate, in order to get cells, it will have to undergo the process of mitosis to grow and to repair itself and to create all the necessary structures that are important for the zygote to develop. And as the zygote will develop, the diploid zygote will eventually form a diploid multicellular male or a diploid multicellular female. Now we know that the egg is always Y, so let's just have a quick revision. But based on whether the sperm cell carries an X or whether the sperm cell carries a Y, we will then have a male or a female. If it is a male, it will definitely be a XY or XYY in some cases. Female is going to be XX. Right? Female will always be XX. The presence of a Y makes it a male, that we discussed when we did the karyotype. Right? And we looked at XYY and severe male characteristics, blah, blah, blah. But here we're focusing on the fact that now we have a diploid multicellular male or a diploid multicellular female. And this male and female, once they reach the stage of puberty, their sex organs will undergo the meiotic division, mitosis. Right? It will undergo meiotic divisions, meiotic division 1, meiotic division 2, and eventually this male and that female will then again give rise to haploid sperm cells and a haploid ovum, and this process will happen again. And that is the continuous. This is just a schematic outline of the human life cycle, but this is the continuous process, right? And that is why this halving effect, the two ends to give you the two separate ends to give you the fusel of the two N, right? The 23 plus 23 to give you, which I should have written here, the 46. Right, that halving effect is ensuring that the number of chromosomes in every generation remains constant, given that there is not a mutation that has taken place. Right, so this is your continuous human life cycle that is taking place for millennia and through various generations. But what I want to touch on quickly here is we've discussed meiosis, and we've discussed that it takes place in the sex organs. Now, meiosis in males is known as spermatogenesis. There is a specific term for the type of meiosis that takes place in the male sex organs, which is known as your testes. Alright? It is known as spermatogenesis. And meiosis in females is not known as gametogenesis. That is a mistake on my part. It is known as oogenesis. So please make that correction. I forgot to make that correction before I started the recording. But make sure that you make that correction. It is oogenesis. And oogenesis, the O means it takes place in the ovary. Right? But spermatogenesis and oogenesis collectively, if we're referring to the two terms collectively, it is known as gametogenesis. Right? It is known as gametogenesis. Genesis means the beginning. Spermato means sperm. So forming sperm from the beginning. Right? Forming an egg cell from the beginning. Right? When something is in the stage of genesis, it means in the beginning. It's happening from the beginning. Right? So just remember that spermatogenesis is for males, oogenesis is for females. In males, it is the testis. In females, it is the ovary. And obviously, we will look at that a little bit later. And we will look at spermatogenesis in this video. But let's look at the structure of the male reproductive system. The male reproductive system is not as intricate as the female reproductive system. Males are quite simple. But let's quickly look at some of the things that is very important for us to know here. So we're going to start. So before I start, we need to understand that we have accessory glands, right? Accessory glands in our male reproductive system. Right, and accessory glands are things that are secreting things, right? Things that are assisting the male reproductive system in performing its function effectively. One of those first accessory glands, so the male reproductive system has 4 accessory glands. It is all 4 mentioned here. Yeah. 4 accessory glands. One of the first ones let's look at is your seminal vesicle, which is the structure over here. Right, that structure over there. Now that structure over there is a gland, as it says here, a gland that produces a nutrient-rich fluid that provides energy for the sperm cells. Now this fluid normally or always contains fructose, or the main substance that is in this rich fluid, nutrient-rich fluid, is fructose. And we would know that fructose is a sugary substance, or a sugary, let's say sugary substance we would learn from grade 11. It's a sugary substance, right, that is made up of maltose and sucrose. I speak under correction on that term. And the reason why, I just want to touch here, it obviously provides energy for the sperm cells. And I think, why does sperm cells need energy? Now, if I were to just draw a simple diagram of the female reproductive system over here, right, that sperm cell, after ejaculation has taken place, that sperm cell will need to travel all the way through the vagina, through the uterus, come all the way through the fallopian tube, and settle at a place here that is known as the ampulla of the fallopian tube. Right, we'll have to settle at a place called the ampulla. This is a little bit of the female, but it settles at a place called the ampulla of the fallopian tube, and that is the site of fertilization. And remember, sperm cells are microscopic, right? So they have to travel. For them, it's traveling millions of kilometers to get to the site of fertilization. And that is why the seminal vesicle is there, to provide that nutrient-rich fluid, to give it energy, enough energy, and to provide it food, right? To provide food and to give it energy to travel all the way to the ampulla, or to the site of fertilization. So that would be the first one. And then we have another one here, the Cowper's glands. Now the Cowper's glands are a very important gland. The Cowper's glands are very important glands, right? It's a very important gland because, besides what they say here, yes, it produces mucus that helps with the movement of sperm. That is very important because it increases motility, movement, right? It increases motility, and that is important, right? increasing motility. But another important function of the Cowper's glands is it clears the urethra of urine that is residing within the urethra. So it allows our body to differentiate, or the male reproductive system to differentiate, right? When ejaculation is taking place, it makes sure that only semen is being ejaculated, and when you are urinating, it makes sure that only urine is passing, right? And obviously we know it lubricates the head of the penis, right? So those are another two important functions that I didn't include in this diagram, and I think is very important to note, because at NSC level we do not know what is coming in the paper. And say you forget that it provides mucus that helps with the movement, you might remember one of the two, and they cannot mark you wrong because it is a function of the Cowper's gland. And then let's look at the prostate gland. Now the prostate gland here, the prostate gland produces an alkaline fluid. So alkaline meaning that it has a pH above 7, right? Alkaline meaning it has a pH above 7, right? That neutralizes acids produced in the vagina, which would kill sperm cells. So vagina being acidic means it has a pH below 7. So what the prostate gland does is, this fluid that the prostate gland secretes, it's a milky alkaline fluid, and that is what gives semen its characteristic smell, right? And this milky alkaline fluid makes sure that neutralization takes place. So in the vagina that is so acidic, that alkaline fluid, which obviously comes from the sperm cells, makes sure that this here, that it is neutralized, right? Neutral, so around about a pH of 7. And this will allow the sperm, or it protects the sperm against that low pH. And this will allow the sperm to move, to ensure maximum motility, obviously, which I did right here. It ensures maximum motility of the sperm, because if it doesn't neutralize, the sperm will essentially burn or disintegrate because of the acidic level. And that is why the prostate gland is important. So let us remember our seminal vesicular Cowper's gland and our prostate gland. Right, and now we move on to other important parts like our scrotum. Now the scrotum here is a very important part of the or I would say it's the most important part of the male reproductive system, is because this is the skin sac that protects and holds the testes outside of the body. Now you might be thinking, oh, it just holds it. Yeah, it does. It's not really that big of a deal, but this scrotum ensures that the temperature of the testes is 2 to 3 degrees below body temperature. And I'm just going to shift here because this is where I wrote it down, right? The scrotum ensures the temperature of the testes is 2 to 3 degrees below body temperature, and this ensures optimal sperm production. Right, we know at NSC level or in exams, in fact, they love asking about how things function of this, the adaptation of this to produce this. It's a twofold question, this for that, right? So they can ask, why is the temperature of the egg that is kept below 2 degrees below body temperature? And then you'd have to answer it nicely. It ensures optimal temperature and blah 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 blah. But mainly we see they ask what happens if it's too high and if it's too low, and we're gonna look at this a little bit later. We're gonna look at a few scenario questions, and we're gonna see how to answer it based on what they're asking, because your answer can go according to temperature, or it can go according to pressure, depending on what they're providing to us. Right, and they say this is the best temperature for sperm, but this is from Mind the Gap. Mind the Gap does leave certain things out, like spermatogenesis is not in Mind the Gap, oogenesis is not in Mind the Gap. So Mind the Gap does leave some things out, and that's why I fill it in here as we go along. Then we look at the testes. Now the testes here produces sperm cells and the hormone testosterone. Now I want to quickly, I think I should have made a reference. Did I make a reference to testosterone? Okay, I didn't make reference to testosterone here, but the hormone testosterone, we're going to look at how the hormone testosterone arises a little bit later. But the hormone testosterone is there for two important functions. It is there to produce and release sperm, right? And it also it is there to produce, and the testis is there to produce the sperm cells and the hormone testosterone. And the hormone testosterone is responsible for the development of secondary characteristics. And the secondary characteristics is basically puberty. And that is why I said we're going to touch on the, let's leave the hormone testosterone for a little bit later. But let's just understand here that the testis produces the sperm cells and the hormone testosterone, but it is the hormone testosterone that is responsible for the development of the secondary sexual characteristics, not the testes, right? Testes means plural, tester, or whichever way you pronounce it is the singular version of it, right? Then if we look here, if I zoom in a bit, here we can see this part here, that's your urethral opening, right? It's the opening of the penis. It's where you urinate, it's where you ejaculate, right? And then this structure over here, let me zoom out a little bit. I don't know if I wrote anything. Yeah, this structure over here is your glands, right? And we don't really go too much into what is the function. We don't need to know what is it's the glands and the foreskin. They hardly ask it, but I just included it to cover base. That's the gland, and then you obviously have the foreskin, and the foreskin should be cut because having foreskin over the head of the penis is very unhygienic, and it can lend itself to bacterial infections. But let's quickly go a little further up. Let's look at the epididymis. Now the epididymis is the structure over here, right? It almost looks like the crown of the testes. I always call it the crown of the testes, because when a king or queen is being crowned, it shows maturation, and that is what the epididymis does. It makes sure that the sperm cells mature, which is very important. It makes sure that the sperm cells mature, and also the sperm is stored there until it is released. But the epididymis, and another important fact here that I wrote down, which mind the gap again forgot to include, the epididymis has a mucosa membrane that secretes a substance, and this substance aids in the movement of sperm along with peristaltic movement, right? Now, because of the mucosa membrane that secretes the substance that is allowing the fluid activity, which aids in the movement of sperm, but also there is a contraction movement, the peristaltic movement that is propelling the sperm forward and forward and forward. And we don't need to know that. That's a little more in depth as to what is causing that peristaltic contractions to take place, right? But it's this do remember this function as well, just in case they ask you for 2, because, or even 3, because then what is the third one if you're going based off, or your educator's going based off mind the gap. Then we have the urethra. Now the urethra transports semen and urine out of the body, not into the body, out of the body. Now you need to know the difference between the urethra and the ureter. Very important. We need to understand what is the difference between the urethra and the ureter. I will leave that with you. That is grade 11 understanding. Let me go on. The vas deferens. Now we look here at the vas deferens over here. That, not just that part, but this whole structure over here, right? The vas deferens transports sperm from the epididymis to the urethra. So I just came and popped into my mind quickly. Let's just quickly do something here. Let's quickly erase all of this, make the drawing nice and clean, and let's quickly do something here. So the testes here is going to produce the sperm. Let's quickly do what I like to call a pathway. The testis here is going to produce the sperm at a temperature that is 2 to 3 degrees below body temperature. So sitting between 34 and 35 degrees Celsius is optimum, right? It is going to leave the testis and it's going to settle here at the epididymis, and in the epididymis is going to, I'm sorry, I'm rapping. It's going to store the sperm until it becomes matured, right? And once it is matured, The sperm is going to leave the epididymis via the vas deferens. Remember, we do not say sperm duct anymore. That's why I scratched out sperm duct. We say vas deferens. It will travel via the vas deferens. Alright, and it will reach this point here. Ooh, it's making straight lines. Yay. It will reach that point there where you have the seminal vesicle, and obviously here with the seminal vesicle it's going to get some energy, right? And then it travels a little bit longer and it's going to meet the prostate gland, and the prostate gland is going to provide it alkaline fluid. It's going to come into the Cowper's gland, and the Cowper's gland is going to ensure that when that sperm is passing through the urethra in the process of ejaculation, say the process of ejaculation is taking place, when that sperm passes through the urethra here, that urine, let's use red for urine, that urine stays behind, but that the sperm is expelled through the urethral opening. And obviously ejaculation would have then taken place, and hopefully we would see fertilization and implantation, ovulation, implantation, and gestation, and all of that, and postlutation, and all of those things would have then later taken place if fertilization was successful. Then let's quickly just look at so this video is just to, you know, all the functions and things like that. I find this very boring. When we look at the questions, however, we're gonna have some fun when I make the video, or I'm gonna have some fun explaining the video on the questions. Let's just quickly look at the longitudinal section of the testes. Now, the longitudinal section of the testes here, it is basically the structure, or the internal structure of the testes. Now, the only thing I want to make a note of here is something called seminiferous tubules. That's the only thing I want to look at here, is your seminiferous tubules, right? Your seminiferous tubules I want to look at here because we're going to look at the structure which we see here, right, of the seminiferous tubules, because they play a part in spermatogenesis, right? That is the only thing that I wanted to show you here, where we find the seminiferous tubules, and this is where we find the seminiferous tubules in the internal view of the testes. Alright? Now, if we come here, this is what I want to explain here. This is a very important part that I need to explain here. This is the seminiferous tubules. This is what I'm going to explain now, is spermatogenesis. Now, I need you, if you pay attention here, spermatogenesis should be fine for you. But what is happening here? Now, what is spermatogenesis? Spermatogenesis is the formation of sperm from germinal epithelial cells that line the seminiferous tubules of the testes. Right? Lining means it lies, it forms a line. So this germinal epithelial cells over here, this germinal epithelial cells over here, right, they are going to start undergoing, or the diploid germinal epithelial cells, wait, I'm losing myself. The diploid germinal epithelial cells are going to start to divide meiotically to give us diploid spermatogonium, right? So from the germinal epithelium, I'm just going to say germinal epithelium, from diploid germinal epithelium, what is going to happen here is going to have mitosis, and mitosis is going to give rise to diploid spermatogonium. Then this diploid spermatogonium will grow and develop into diploid primary spermatocyte, right? So germinal epithelium undergoes diploid, should have been 2 in there, diploid germinal epithelium undergoes mitosis and forms spermatogonium, diploid spermatogonium. The diploid spermatogonium then undergoes growth and forms diploid primary spermatocytes, right? So we could see from there to there was mitosis, from there to there was mitosis, from there to there we had growth, right? Primary spermatocyte. Then that, and we can see it got from that smaller size, it got a little bit bigger. Then that primary spermatocyte undergoes meiosis. And after the first meiotic division, it will give us rise to two secondary haploid spermatocytes. So that primary spermatocyte will undergo meiosis, and after the first meiotic division, it is going to give us two, which we can see here. I don't know why there's a third one here. It is going to give us two, so there's an area, it's only supposed to be two. It is going to give us two secondary spermatocytes, but they will be haploid. And remember, that is correct, because the first meiotic division is, when I explained meiosis, the first meiotic division is reduction division that is taking place. So, right, so now we're going to have, so it went from diploid to haploid. So if we go again, diploid germinal epithelial cells undergo meiosis to form a spermatogonium. That spermatogonium, the diploid spermatogonium, will grow to give us the diploid primary spermatocyte. That diploid primary spermatocyte will undergo meiosis, but after the first meiotic division, there will be, or the primary spermatocyte, the diploid primary spermatocyte, would have given rise to two secondary haploid spermatocytes. Now that after the secondary, or after the second meiotic division, that secondary, so remember it was two here, right? Two haploid secondary spermatocytes. That secondary spermatocytes, right, will then undergo the second meiotic division, and we would have four mature, and when it matures eventually, we would have four mature haploid sperm, right? Spermatids, right? So these spermatids, right here, they are not mature yet, right? They will grow and mature, and then once they've grown and mature, it would give rise to spermatozoa. Now you might be asking, what is the Sertoli cell over here? Now this Sertoli cell is also another important cell, is because some of these germinal epithelial cells develop this large Sertoli cell here, and this Sertoli cell is there to provide food for the developing sperm. So can you see, it's a process that's happening like that. You're going from the germinal epithelial cells, the diploid germinal epithelial cells that undergo mitosis to give you the diploid spermatogonium. To give you the diploid spermatogonium, the diploid spermatogonium will then undergo growth to give us the diploid primary spermatocyte, and then that primary spermatocyte, the diploid primary spermatocyte, will undergo meiosis and give rise to two secondary haploid spermatocytes, and then those secondary haploid spermatocytes will undergo the second meiotic division, and they will give rise to four non-mature spermatids, and then these spermatids will then undergo maturation and growth to give us our four mature spermatozoa that are also haploid, our haploid spermatozoa. So it's I use this one, and then that spore would go and feed, will go and feed on the Sertoli cell over there and get its energy, and then obviously expel. When it's expelled, then from there it's gonna go to the epididymis, and then after the epididymis, it's going to go to the vas deferens, it's going to go to the seminal vesicle, it's going to go to the Cowper's gland, it's going to get to the prostate gland, then it's going to go through the urethra, where the Cowper's gland is going to retract the urine and allow the sperm to ejaculate, and it's going to settle in the vagina if that is where it's being deposited to, right? And then, so that was this process of spermatogenesis in depth. But all you need to say is, that's why I kept it for last year, all you need to say in the exams are these 3 points. That's all you need to say. Under the influence of testosterone, diploid cells in the seminiferous tubules undergo meiosis to form haploid sperm cells. That's all you say. That is from the exam guidelines. That's all you say in the exam. But this was just for the understanding. You need to understand what is happening, that we're going from diploid germinal epithelial cells that undergo mitosis to give us the diploid spermatogonium. That diploid spermatogonium undergoes growth to give us the diploid primary spermatocyte. That diploid primary spermatocyte undergoes the first meiotic division to give rise to two haploid secondary spermatocytes. Those haploid secondary spermatocytes undergo the second meiotic division to give us 4 non-mature spermatids, and then those spermatids will undergo growth and maturation to give us the 4 haploid spermatozoa, and that spermatozoa will then go and feed on the Sertoli cell to get food and energy. Boom. That is that. So I'm just going to erase here quickly. It's not erased viciously. Can always just backspace. Okay, I'll backspace a little bit later, or I'll just fill in the notes again. I just want to touch on something here. Now, in the I don't really like to touch on the stuff that is not really asked, but in the seminiferous tubules, the seminiferous tubules are surrounded by connective tissue, right? And this connective tissue contains interstitial cells, like in between, right, cells. Now I need to touch on this in this type of interstitial cell, right, that is known as the cells of Leydig. So the reason why I drew it separate is because we are assuming now here that there's connective tissue obviously over here, right? Now these cells of Leydig are responsible for producing the male hormone testosterone, and that is why I put it here, because I want to explain to you how the hormone testosterone comes about. So let's quickly just look at our brain, right? Very simple drawing of the brain. We know at the base of the brain there is a gland, your pituitary gland or your hypophysis, which is known as the master hormone. But besides that, because we're not looking at the brain just yet, but the hypophysis here has an important function in reproduction, especially in human reproduction, for the secretion of, or the stimulation of the secretion of 2 very important hormones, which is your luteinizing hormone and your follicle stimulating hormone, your LH and your FSH. Now LH, the reason why I included it here is your hypophysis is going to stimulate the secretion of LH. When this LH is secreted, it is going to stimulate the cells of Leydig. So this LH is going to cause a stimulation on the cells of Leydig to produce testosterone, right? To produce testosterone. Remember, this is all happening in the testes internally, right? And then it also secretes FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, because I think the misconception a lot of people have is that LH and FH is solely in the female reproductive system, and that is wrong, because it also assists the male reproductive system, because the follicle stimulating hormone with the testosterone now is going to assist or going to facilitate, right, or stimulate the process of spermatogenesis. So this process of spermatogenesis that is taking place here is under the control of FSH and testosterone, right? Under the control of FSH and testosterone. So if we do it diagrammatically, your hypophysis is going to secrete LH. LH is then going to stimulate the cells of Leydig to produce testosterone. I don't know why I'm writing out the whole word. Testosterone, right? But it's also going to secrete FSH. And FSH, with the aid of testosterone, is going to ensure the stimulation of spermatogenesis. Right? It's not an integrate process, not very integrate. It's negative feedback mechanism, which we'll also look at in later topics. And then, so I think I touched on everything that is important. I just want to touch on, this is the structure of the sperm cell. So we have the head, we have the middle section, and then we have the tail. Now, This I wanted to touch on just quickly. We have the acrosome. Now, the acrosome contains enzymes to digest the wall of the egg cell for fertilization. Now, there is something called the acrosome reaction and what's it called? Capacitation, but we don't need to know that that's medical level stuff. But that is just explaining how the acrosome interacts with the zona pellucida of the egg cell and all of those types of things, and breaks down the egg wall so that it can get there to, you know, to fertilize, and the zygote can develop, all of those things. But we just need to know this. It has a nucleus that contains 23 chromosomes. It has mitochondria, which provides energy for swimming, and it has a tail that is also used for swimming. I'm not going to touch too much on this. We're going to touch on this in exam based questions. Reason I'm saying we're going to touch on this in exam based questions is because I want to show you how to answer when they ask for the structural adaptations of the sperm cell to perform its function. Then we're going to look at that a little bit more in depth. And then just for your interest sake, not for interest sake, this might be asked. This is just a front view of the male reproductive system. Remember, this here would be considered the side view of the male reproductive system. This is the front view. So the front view is nice to explain. Sperm cells, spermatozoa, form there, it matures, it comes to the epididymis, it goes via the vas deferens, it comes down here, you know, your seminal vesicle, your prostate gland, all of that stuff there. Here's your Cowper's glands. So it passes down, it's going to get ejaculated out there, but the Cowper's glands is there to ensure that the urine stays behind. Your prostate gland is there to give the nutrient fluid, the alkaline fluid. The seminal vesicle is there to provide food so that it can swim out and get ejaculated and continue swimming and get ejaculated, right? You have the urinary bladder. Obviously, that's where our urine is stored. You have your urethra. I said go and look at the difference between urethra and ureter. So basically everything I touched on here is done. Let me just check, and then we'll come to puberty. Let's just quickly wrap up this video. Puberty in males. So puberty, this is the time period during which sex organs develop and gametes are produced. In boys, it happens around ages 12, plus minus ages 12, right? And then puberty in boys, this is the 5 that you must know. It's stimulated by testosterone. The change that is gonna happen, it's gonna be growth in male sex organs. It's going to be production of sperm cells. It's going to be growth of pubic hair, of facial hair, of body, of hair in general. And then it's going to be development of muscles and the deepening of the voice, right? Development of the sexual drive, increased sweat production, skin becomes oily, and this is why you're gonna get acne, you know, and all those pimples. Oh, I'm so grateful I've been spared that. And then you're also gonna have a lot of behavioral changes, mood swings, outbreaks. You know, in that puberty session, they liken boys to girls because they are just so moody. And then, you know, after puberty fizzles out, then they sort of, or in some cases, in some of the rarer cases, they sort of settle down. So that is that. What I want you to remember here is your process of spermatogenesis, and then obviously you need to know all functions that I explained here. Go back and reference the difference between spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Also, we're going to touch on that a little bit later, but know this drawing, know this diagram as well, what is happening, how it happens. Make sure you understand what is happening with this whole thing here, because we don't know what they ask at national levels anymore, right? They are so unnecessary. They are so they're tiresome, just so tiresome. And then also just understand what is happening here as well, which I did explain. So go back, reference, and skip parts if you do understand them, obviously. And then obviously puberty, very easy section. And then the next video will be us discussing exam-based questions on the male reproductive system.